A new internal government report is painting a very dark picture for the future of Canada in 2040. Titled Future Lives, Social Mobility in Question, the report paints a picture of what life in Canada could soon be like if current economic policy stays the course. While speaking in Vaughan, Pierre Poilievre spoke on the report and how dangerous the future could be if the Liberals get re-elected.
And it is a very dangerous future if the Liberals get their fourth term. And this isn't just my words. It's Mark Carney's own government department. Just a week ago, we learned that one of the departments of the government, the Privy Council office, has made some very depressing predictions about the way the country is headed after a decade of Liberal rule. I'm going to quote directly from this Privy Council report. In 2040, upward mobility is almost unheard of in Canada, they predict. Hardly anyone believes they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts, and many worry about sliding down the social order. It forecasts more people may struggle to afford rent, bills, and groceries. Resulting stress could worsen mental health challenges. This would increase demand for social services. And then there's some specific forecasts that the current Liberal government is making about our future. In 2040, owning a home is not a realistic goal for many. Inequality between those who rent and those who own has become a key driver of social, economic, and political conflict. The report goes on to say that people may lose faith in the Canadian project altogether. It forecasts that many will leave the country to avoid this rising cost and declining opportunity. And they believe that it will lead to a mental health crisis. More people will emigrate to jurisdictions where they believe upward mobility and or higher standards of living are easier to obtain. Quote, if young workers leave Canada, it may become harder to pay for the systems that support a growing number of older people. It says things are so bad that, and this is a quote, I'm quoting from the government here, if I had said this myself, you would have thought it was outlandish, but this is the government's own predictions about how bad things are headed right now.
The Toronto Sun's Bryan Passifume has more on the report.
So this report was produced by an organization called Policy Horizons Canada, and that's a government sort of a think tank, I guess. It's overseen by the Privy Council office. So this is kind of people who work within the government who analyze current public policy and sort of branch off of that, sort of like make predictions based on current policy. So this report is entitled Future Lives, Social Mobility in Question, and it paints a pretty bleak picture of Canada's future. It predicts by 2040 we're looking at a almost like an aristocracy of old, where everything's ruled by land barons and people are pretty much at the behest of people who own land and who are kind of the elite in society, and that upward mobility in society is impossible. The kind of the sort of the dystopian societies you read about in history books that thought were long behind us. And this is what this government report predicts for Canada. It sort of paints a picture of what kind of we're seeing now. We're looking at affordability becoming possible. Post-secondary schooling becomes impossible to achieve unless you're rich enough to afford the tuition and the housing costs. Pretty much making post-secondary education kind of a sort of a secondary in life. Society realizes they can survive without a degree, and universities only exist to help the elite cement their place in society, which sounds hauntingly like society was like the not too distant past. Housing will, as it is now, owning a home is less attainable than ever. They predict by 2040, housing and land ownership will only be passed within families. Owning a home will be impossible unless you have some sort of intergenerational wealth, things like that. And yeah, it's predicting a pretty bleak future where people of social classes don't mix, and trust in government and business and capitalism and everything else kind of just collapses. And people sort of revert to kind of almost like a serfdom, living off the land. People, Canadian families poaching wildlife for food, things like that. I think it's interesting. The reaction I'm seeing from this report is from people saying, well, this is kind of the reality we're already living. It's not a big stretch to look at sort of where we are now with where current government policy has brought us to, and it's not a short stretch to imagine society, declining more. And kind of the ironic thing is that, this is a public policy think tank run completely within, the Privy Council office. So really, this is a government organization painting a bleak picture based on the past decade of government policies. So really, it's almost like a warning that if we keep the status quo, things are just going to get worse. That there's really no other way to interpret that.